Welcome to WAHNcast, the official podcast of the Women's Affordable Housing Network. This is our space to connect, get real, and talk about what's really happening in housing, from bold leadership to resident stories that ground us in purpose. We're here to amplify voices, strengthen each other, and share the kind of conversations you'd have with a friend who gets it. Because when our voices are amplified, our communities grow stronger, and so do we.
Welcome to WAHNcast. Imagine a world where every rooftop, every brick, every neighborhood is part of a larger weave, where policy, private capital, and community heart come together, not as separate threads, but as one tapestry of opportunity. That's the world Valerie White is helping build. I'm Ashley Northcutt, President and CEO of National Women's Affordable Housing Network, and I'm honored to spend time today with Valerie. She's a force in the affordable housing, economic investment, and policy innovation areas. As Senior Executive Director of LISC New York, is that still your title?
No.
It's national.
I'm the head of National Housing Strategic Initiatives, but I still also run the New York office. So
Valerie has spent more than 30 years in sectors both private and public, from leading finance teams and rating analysis to shaping minority and women-owned business strategy and steering large-scale state development. She didn't arrive at this moment by chance. Her journey and success are an example of what can happen when curiosity, rigor, and courage intersect. And now, with her newest mantle at LISC, she is poised to not only expand across New York State, but nationally, bringing fresh energy, bold strategy, and collaborative storytelling to an urgent issue we all face: housing access and community development. In this episode, we'll hear how Valerie thinks about equity, what keeps her going through the toughest policy battles, and what breakthroughs may be on the horizon. Welcome, Valerie. We're really excited to have you.
thank you. It's just pleasure to be here.
Let's start by hearing what inspired you to get involved in affordable housing and community development, and what early experiences continue to shape the work you do.
I have been in this field since the early 90s when low-income housing tax credits were very early. LIHTC, and I just remember them being like gold, right? In those days, you were getting 25 cents on the dollar. People didn't really know what they were. I started my career in housing and development at the New York City Housing Authority, primarily building what was then the off-balance sheet housing, utilizing Section 8 off-balance sheet properties, things that were not part of the appropriated portfolio there. And bond financing was an avenue to add to the much needed units for New York City Housing Authority. So I've been familiar with LIHTC since very early on. It moved into my work looking at the larger portfolio across New York City that led me to S&P Global, which was Standard & Poor's at the time. And I led the development of criteria and methodology to actually rate housing authorities so that they can use their future appropriation to securitize finance bonds or other lending instruments so that they can get the rehabilitation done quicker because, again, the buildings were aged, the portfolio across the country was deteriorating. And that was a very interesting experience, but it led me to go on to run the business for affordable housing, standalone transactions, project-based Section 8 transactions, military housing, which was very interesting at the time, utilizing private developers through public-private partnerships to rebuild the bases that were old on like a 49-year ground lease. I worked in global social housing, and then the State Housing Finance Agency business also came in underneath me, and that moved also into collateralized loan and collateralized debt obligations with the underlying assets being public finance in addition to housing. So it was a great journey of a career, 13 years with the Housing Authority and 17 years with Standard & Poor's. And I got to a point where, I was traveling, very fortunate to be able to go all over the world. But I wanted to get back to actually touching the units, right? Touching what I was doing. So I took an early retirement package from S&P when it was offered. I did some work at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So as New York folks know, that's going development and is now a thriving industrial park. But that also had me learn more about community development because it's surrounded by three of the largest public housing units in New York City. So as we were developing business strategies, matching workforce development opportunities from people in public housing to the industrial manufacturing that was happening on the campus, how do you engage the community when you're building up economy, particularly with something so large and that have been historically so vital for the borough of Brooklyn? And very interesting time. I love going down there now. I don't live far, and looking to see how the facility has been built up. I was asked to join the Cuomo administration to run the state's Minority and Women Business Division, which I did for about 2 years. But when I saw that the LISC New York City job was open, I thought that was a good combination of my financial analysis, community development, credit risk analysis and skill set, and building that into a strategy to build community and investment within New York City. So I joined LISC in April of 2020, which was a very interesting time because we were in the middle of COVID. And I actually stayed a little bit longer in the state to help set up these systems to ensure that, everything was set since everything had moved to virtual work. And I worked specifically in New York City market from 2020 to 2022. In 2022, I was asked to take over the Buffalo office. So we were expanding our reach, looking at building pipeline, investment capital, and capacity and programmatic support for the state of New York, not just in the two markets we were in, which were New York and Buffalo, but looking at the opportunities in other urban and rural centers across the state of New York. And that includes Syracuse, the Micron chip plant happening near Rochester, Albany, and Westchester. And I was just recently asked to take over and look at the national housing strategy. So I'm very excited for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to it.
What a huge compliment to be asked to take over nationally from that. I feel like you could teach a master's class on so many aspects of housing with your background. That's amazing.
Yes, it was an honor, and I am excited to do it. And I can, now really utilize my national and global experience in affordable housing, social housing, and investment strategies. And when we're at this time in affordable housing, and utilize it with the organization like LISC, that is a community development financial institution.
Yeah.
And investment in pipeline is important. We want to be sure it's matched with all the ancillary support that are necessary in the ecosystem for housing and community development.
Yeah, I feel like it's full circle and you get to utilize expertise from all different areas of your roles over time. So tell us a little bit more about your new role at LISC's National Housing Team and what are your main priorities? What do you want to achieve while you're here?
I sat back with the housing team, our president, Michael Pugh, and some of the senior leaders in LISC, not only in the LISC organization, but as one LISC. You probably know we also have 4 affiliates: the Loan Fund Management, which runs off-balance sheet funds, the National Equity Fund, which is the syndicator for our low-income housing tax credits, Broad Street, which is the syndicator for our new markets tax credits, but also does other financial solutions for community development, and LISC Green, which is focused on sustainable development and lending, with housing being their main focus. So to step back and look at the entirety of the one LISC suite of products, what we offer, how could we develop a strategy that's ensuring that we're bringing that full support along with our lending and LISC and all the programmatic aspects to local markets? So we developed a 3-pronged strategy approach. The first being thought leadership, the ability to have conversations like this, letting folks know what we're doing at LISC, bringing our expertise to bear to the market for discussion, and looking for longer term solutions to address the housing crisis. The second peg in the 3-leg stool, so to speak, is building a pipeline, finding ways to expand and increase our pipeline all across our geography. And we have committed under our LISC strategic plan over the next 2 years, $5.2 billion in increasing access to housing. and another 57,000 units within that time period. So it's very important for us to be sure that we're setting through pipeline development, business development, identifying market opportunities while taking into account the very shifting economic factors in this cycle in the housing market. But we're also going to be looking at ways to raise capital and utilize innovative structures that will give additional liquidity, raise more capital and bring more funding in that we can in turn invest back out in the market. The third leg on that stool is our development of programmatic and capacity building support for our local offices, many of which are doing these activities already, but bringing it under a holistic umbrella, so to speak, to ensure that there are foundational aspects of their programmatic development included in their programs, and then in turn delivering that to the local markets. And we're going to be focused on home repair, whether that's weatherization or just general home repair for age portfolios or homes that are in weather-challenged areas. The second is heirs property to ensure, right, that homeowners are not subject to troubled titles, third-party takings, deed theft, or historical issues with their property title. And we'll be working on that. And that'll look different depending on the geography in the country. The third is our capacity building and support for emerging developers that are new, that are looking at their small business to move into development, and also for nonprofit developers, which of course we all know in housing, they are having a very difficult time of it because their margins have always run thin and they never really recovered from the mortgage crises, that happened in 2005 through 7, but also COVID was a big impact. And then of course, tariffs, insurance costs, other rising costs that have been troublesome to nonprofit developers, well, to everyone. We are going to be working forth with faith-based and mission-driven institutions across our geography, those who have existing land or structures, vacant structures on which or in which they can build affordable housing, but providing them with the capacity support to determine how do you go about this process. As a faith-based institution, how do you bring along your members to this larger development plan to be sure they're not getting involved with a developer and selling their air rights for $1 and they're really worth $1 million? All of these type of issues will be part of the capacity support. And then finally, we're looking to ensure under our fifth programmatic pillar that home ownership, first-time home ownership, there is access to those who are looking forward to it, and that we are supporting nonprofits, access to mortgage readiness and credit counseling and brokers and loans that can help first-time home buyers, down payment assistance, achieve that home. So we're really excited with this strategic plan that we put together, and we're looking forward to implementing it in collaboration with our LISC local national programs and the 4 affiliates that I mentioned.
So you guys are just doing the good work, Valerie.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be at LISC. This has been really the mission that we stand on, the why, the North Star. It's all focused on ensuring that we're not only bringing access to housing, but all of the parts of the ecosystems that build strong communities.
That's what's amazing. And I particularly love the making sure people are able to buy for the first time and then keep their homes.
Right. Exactly.
The stories you hear can be heartbreaking over time. So the way you all, each prong you were talking about, wait, there's more? Wait, they're doing more? Do you plan to sleep?
Yes, of course.
That's a great team.
Very exciting to be at this stage in my career. But at this point, I am working to enjoy myself. I always enjoyed myself, but it's a different stage and a different way of approaching it. And I am here just really committed to the focus of building up these ecosystems. And I'm just very fortunate to have the opportunity at this stage of my career.
I'm just so glad you're in housing, Valerie. I say this sometimes on WAHNcast, but I just think through housing, you meet the best people in the world. And like you saying, like you actually at this stage in your career are able to do it basically to give back, to make a difference. It's with all the experience you have is just amazing. So thank you for that. What are the biggest barriers you see for smaller or community-led developers, and how can LISC or others help them overcome these challenges?
Thank you for that question, because that reinforces to me that making that one of our programmatic pillars is important. There are a number of challenges to that particular cohort of developers, and it revolves around access to capital in particular, and then coupled with the rising costs that you're seeing when you develop. And the cost of developing affordable housing is the cost. Is really no different than developing market rate housing. A Class A property may be a little bit more because you're throwing in a pool or a concierge or what have you, but the bricks cost the same, the paint costs the same, the insurance pretty much costs the same. So you have these expenses that are rising, but yet and still you need to try to keep the affordability level down. And that's in a time that you're seeing some reduction in subsidy. Fortunately, we did see most states get a 12% increase and 9% tax credits. So they're more available. We're excited about that, because that is one of the key drivers for both nonprofit as well as emerging developers. But the access to capital is a big issue. The cost of capital is expensive, although as of, I think, middle of last week, it's getting a little bit cheaper. But
that's true.
Yes. You still have the issues of, the tariffs that impact supplies and goods and materials costs. And you still have the issues of whether or not there are people to actually afford to live there, right? Because we continue to deal with issues of inflation and the like. So ensuring that you have a steady income flow is a little bit different. So those are the primary challenges. I will say for nonprofits in particular, as I alluded to earlier, they are having a bit of a difficult time. Nonprofits, developers generally they will hold on to the property. They will look for amendments on loans, and they work very closely with tenants and residents to ensure to keep them in their homes. But the pandemic, COVID, was really a big anchor for those organizations, because you had folks not able to pay rent for quite a bit of time. And there was never a way that really made up the difference. And so we are seeing across the country, particularly smaller housing nonprofits, just continue to struggle. And so that's something that we'll be looking very closely at as part of the housing strategy, to find ways to help support those organizations for sustainability and the ability to provide these sorely needed units to the community.
I'm going to throw in another question too. When you're working with the faith-based community, are you finding that because the conversation on affordable housing is more common now, are you finding that people are more open to that idea when you first start talking about, more educated on the options? Or is that something that still you reach out and people haven't heard about this partnership type of deal yet?
As it relates to the faith-based organizations that are looking very specifically, right, to introduce affordable housing, it's generally because a segment of their congregation or membership are having difficulty finding homes. So it could be that they have a large senior population and there's not sufficient enough senior housing, or they might have a large population of underhoused constituents or in their congregation that are either doubled up or living in substandard housing. And it's a way to, number one, find a solution that is plaguing the congregation, but also a way to make money, right? And when I say money, that they can reinvest back into the community.
Sure.
So that's generally the approach that I see most time with the faith-based organizations, where the conversation requires quite a bit of support is, what does it mean? Whenever you talk to community-based organizations or faith-based organizations, or just folks in general, we all know, everyone's like, well, we should build more affordable housing.
And we want to. Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, let's just go ahead. But just when you think about it, and again, I said it earlier, the cost to build the housing is the same as it is to build a market rate even if you strip out the amenities, right? So we're talking about looking for investors. It's more difficult for new developers or emerging small developers or nonprofit to get lending options because they don't have the same balance sheet that a for-profit larger developer would have. And that's why you have the community development financial institutions. That's why you have organizations like LISC that are here, and we're working with those smaller developers, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, to provide that what we call patient capital, because as a partner, and we don't call borrowers, and we're not the lender, we are partners, and we're
like that
together to find this solution that this particular organization is bringing in the form of a project. But of course, one affordable housing deal, there could be 12 to 15 layers, right?
Yeah.
Financing, which would include some funding from CDFI organizations like LISC, and maybe some commercial funding, and then the tax credits. And then you might have had, right, CDBG, potentially some home funds. So as we're seeing shifting in those programs, what funding or what will be there, we are thinking about ways to close those financing gaps through innovative financial and investment solutions and providing that support to our partners in the community.
This is just amazing. You can imagine there's a lot of overlap in the conversations we have at Women's Affordable Housing Network, because new women developers often have the same, like, we don't have a balance sheet to prove, we don't have the pre-dev costs to even get started. But what I love hearing this conversation from you and LISC having access to this type of funding and collaboration across the country is that's coming. And then that just means more innovation and more creative affordable housing solutions are coming with more people at the table. So amazing work.
I will say that many of the locations across the LISC geography, and that's including New York, where I still oversee that program, we do have developed for training programs. They may have a variety of different names, but they are basically there coupling capacity along with access to capital. And in particular, the program that we had in New York actually brings together capacity, access to capital, and access to other developers, maybe for a sub-grantee agreement to help build up that balance sheet, or other jobs that a government agency might have to have access to that. And we take them through an entire, workshop training. And at the end, we have in New York, and we created this in our Charlotte office, a Shark Tank, right? So getting between 20 to 30 different financial providers, syndicators, venture capitalists, fund managers, commercial banks, investment banks, and other investors. And of course, we're there too as LISC, because we would like these partners to be our customers. And we have the groups pitch their deal in several different rooms, and they usually walk out with several matches that may be necessary for that stack. So we're thinking of these creative ways, and we have a similar program in Charlotte. We're looking at one to stand up one in Kalamazoo, as well as down in Virginia. The Bay Area has been very active in the faith-based housing sector for many years and has done well there. Chicago as well. So it's there, and we're pulling it all together and ensuring it's under a standardized umbrella. And we have a plan to elevate it strongly and through our thought leadership, let everybody know about it. So.
That's amazing. Having grown up in the Queen City myself of Charlotte, North Carolina, I love hearing that. And I know you have some great partners there then, probably in Dream
we do.
And Liz Ward with Give Impact. These are some people making a huge difference in the city with you all, I bet. So that's amazing to hear. How do you approach preserving affordability and preventing displacement alongside the new construction, in addition to all this helping fund new developers in the space?
Well, that's part of the reason why we have strong relationships with nonprofit partners. Many of them, we may have housing nonprofit partners that are developing the housing, but we also partner with organizations that do housing advocacy. So we look to ensure that we're finding ways to establish partnerships. And in some instances, we're able to fund them with philanthropic sources, or in the past with government grants that we got that were specifically put in place to ensure that folks are able to stay in their home, and that you have a support system when emergencies are needed. So we have the ecosystem, again, right? It's the development, it's the community-based organizations that are there. They're on the ground. They are the first line of support to members of the community, and we work hand in hand with them to ensure that they can continue to make the connection. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's, some of the properties that we may have financed, but sometimes it isn't. It's just that need in the community. And the more that we can ensure that people have access to stable housing for the long term, then the better it would be overall to address the housing crises.
100% agree. Can you share any really neat examples of impactful partnerships through nonprofits, faith groups, resident groups that have made a real difference in LISC's work?
Yes, absolutely. I'll talk about a couple in some of the different places. So right now in Cleveland, we are working with the municipality and as well with KeyBank. And that Cleveland office worked with our loan fund management plus the local office in LISC, because remember I talked about the affiliates working together with the partners to create the Cleveland Housing Investment Fund. And that is going to focus on preserving and building affordable housing for those at the 80% AMI level. And we expect to see 3,000 homes built through that fund and financed through that fund over the next decade. Of course, I'm from New York. I'll talk a little bit about wealth opportunities realized through home ownership, or our Worth Collaborative, where we're looking to preserve and retain homeowners as well as introduce new first-time homeowners, 5,000 in 3 years. That grant and program is sunsetting at the end of the year. Of course, we were able to identify 9,000 between new homes, retention, and preservation. And we worked with it was a database of over 75 partners who were part of a database. And we utilized technology. We created like a website where those who were interested in retaining or obtaining home ownership, they went in, they put in their information, they were matched with our partners who provided the service that they need. We also tracked how many people were hitting the website more than once, because if you started with credit rating training, then you came back and you needed home readiness, then you came back and then you needed a mortgage broker, and then finally, you have a home. In addition to the website, we offered several in-person fairs where we would bring those who needed home ownership services together with the partners. And we also worked with partners across the city in Westchester who were offering these fairs when we were bringing that information to them. So it was a highly successful program. We're hoping to find a partner, and we're looking to not only continue it in New York, but potentially stand it up across the entire LISC geography.
It's really cool how you monitored that. And I just get so excited about AI now because I'm trying to embrace it, but how you're able to monitor how people are coming back and like basically how serious and how ready are they for this program, and then just support them through the whole process. That's amazing work. I hope you do take this nationally under your leadership. What policy changes are you most excited about or believe are most necessary right now?
Well, there are a few out there that may be putting a little bit of pressure on the housing crises, but there are others that are looking to help drive the ability to, move our pipeline forward and support affordable housing. So I'll focus on those. One that we're really excited about is the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, or NHIA, and that will create a tax credit similar to LIHTC for affordable home ownership. And if it's passed, we're expecting that it will preserve more than 500,000 affordable single-family homes over the next 10 years and generate over $150 million in development activity, as well as a little less than 46 billion. I'm sorry, that was 151 billion, I'm sorry, and
Wow.
46 billion in federal, state, and local revenue, creating about 1.1 million jobs. And I, actually talked a little bit about that in an op-ed myself, and our head policy, a chief policy officer wrote for the Syracuse Standard, because in Syracuse, New York, there needs to be building up of single family or home ownership opportunities as that the Micron chip plant comes, which is going to be $100 billion over the next 10 years of economic influx. But as people are coming over there to work, not only at that plant, but the ancillary businesses, which is about a 280-mile radius of supportive businesses to support that operation, there needs to be homes available. So we talked about how an act like that can help spur homeownership development in that article. The other thing that we're seeing across many states is the Yes in God's Backyard Act. So to get back to faith-based institutions and organizations, we see that from a national standpoint, and we're looking at it will create about $50 million in annual grants to communities that would help remove some of the onerous zoning that helps or doesn't help faith-based institutions in their development. But a lot of states have their own very specific acts. There's one in California, I think another one in Arizona. In New York is the New York Faith-Based Housing Act that has been up, a couple of times to be voted on. And I've written a number of articles on that as well. And we've been in support of that because that is very supportive of our program as well.
This is just amazing. I'm soaking it all up. I want to go and put all your articles when we post this so people can read them, because this is fascinating to learn from. What advice do you have for women leaders in housing and allies who want to be part of this systems change?
So the advice I would give women leaders in this field is to, number one, network. Find a way to ensure that you know who in the field could help support the work that you're doing. And when we talk about housing and housing development and affordable housing, there are so many different disciplines that are part of that. You mentioned you were an accounting partner. Accounting services are important. A legal skill set. I happen to be an attorney by education, but I need a lawyer because I'm not going to, be my own client, right?
Amen.
Yes. Financial analysts, architects, developers, construction and contractors, where we're seeing more and more women businesses there. How can you put together a way to support the growth of women businesses as well as growing leaders in the field? And, providing access, right? Because we talked a little bit earlier that access to opportunity and capital for some is not as readily available for others. So women leaders can help move forward, not only through that, but for mentoring and being available for women who are new in the field or up and coming leaders to provide support, mentoring, connections, as they are looking to help address affordable housing and the crisis that we're facing in the US. So I think all of those things together could collectively bring systems change and try to address holistically through, women's support, the affordable housing crises and a solution to it.
And I especially love what you said there. We launched a mentorship program at WAHN last year, and it has been an outstanding success. And what we keep hearing is, when I found this woman mentor that lives in a whole different area of the United States to me that I would have never known, I find myself asking more questions than I felt comfortable asking in the past. Like bringing up that next generation with no judgment and feeling very welcome to ask any question, whatever you need to continue your success and learn about the industry so far. So I particularly love that one.
And I think those conversations, particularly if they're in different markets, I think that when conversations are had, you realize how similar the issues are, right, in the different markets. And so while the markets may have differences and you always have to customize your approach and your strategy and your investment, the underlying issues or challenges are pretty much the same.
Sure.
So having that opportunity to have the discussions help bring best practices and thoughts and innovation and creativity to the work that folks are doing. And so I always encourage that
Yeah.
for folks to make those connections.
And it's like what you said, you're kind of tying together all the great things people are doing at LISC throughout the local markets. It's same with Women's Affordable Housing Network. Why reinvent the wheel? If someone's doing something great, go steal that idea and build on it, right? Like, let's keep this moving forward. Valerie, how do you measure or define success beyond the usual financial metrics? Like, what stories or outcomes matter most to you?
I will say that we're extremely proud of our return on investment on our programs and initiatives. And since we began in 1979 at LISC in the South Bronx, I am from New York, so I always have to add that in there, we have invested $35 billion into our communities, and that has leveraged an additional $93 billion in development. So I think those numbers tell a really, really powerful story about our investment, what we can bring to the table as LISC. Everyone knows who LISC is. We now also have these affiliates that support that, but these numbers show the tremendous commitment and financial support that LISC has provided to communities since 1979. But we have a whole host of programs. We have our LISC Housing Opportunities for Public Educators program in San Diego, where that puts home ownership in the hands of local educators who often do not necessarily find it as easy to find first-time homes. I talked a little about our WORTH program, Wealth Opportunities Realized Through Home Ownership in New York. But we also had two programs in two of our other geographies. One was in San Antonio and the other one was in Virginia. And those went directly to retention and first-time home buyer opportunities. We see things like establishing small business investment loans, working with some of our partners for working capitals for those smaller emerging developers who need that working capital because, of course, it's a reimbursable business. You get paid when you finish a certain level of the contractual work. So how are we ensuring that we're working with partners so that those, emerging developers have access to working capital? So those are some of the ways that we are continuing to ensure that we are completing and knitting together the entire ecosystem for success. So the metrics are great, the numbers are great, our investment numbers we're proud of, but looking to see when a developer has built something, or when someone walks into their home, or when a teacher in San Diego gets their home, or the first project that's going to be built in Cleveland, or the very strong heirs property that we have in Jacksonville, which has really settled title issues and for hundreds of Jacksonville residents. Those are the stories that really elevate our dedication to the mission.
It's amazing that you have all those stories, right? And then that giant return on investment. Like,
Yeah.
LISC has made a difference. There's no question about it. Like, amazing. So looking forward, in 5 years, what changes are you hoping to see in the housing landscape thanks to LISC's work?
We'll continue to support certain legislation like the ones I mentioned, the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, Yes in God's Backyard. Again, seeing that the new markets tax credits, which helps with mixed use properties, now it's permanent. So that was something that we advocated for quite some time, a growth in the LITAC, the 9%. All of those things we're hoping that would help spur other investors and partners to come in and look at the affordable housing crisis as a worthy investment. The thing about housing is it's a hard asset, right? This is a business proposition for us. This is a business drive for us, is business development, but it's still an element of community investment. But housing is a hard asset. People always need housing, regardless of what the current political or economic situation is. Housing is always there. So we're hopeful with some of the strategies that we're looking to bring forth, these particular bills that I mentioned, overwhelming support of the need of affordable housing that we're seeing, not only in our communities, but discussed about on a national level, which is why we feel the thought leadership part is so important to be part of the discussion, that if we continue to talk about this, we might see some movement to ensure not only is there affordable housing, but we continue the development and support, the capacity, the investment in the community organizations that are there to support each community through the ecosystem and, build stronger neighborhoods for all.
It's amazing. So a little special question after talking to you, because I want to stay on the phone with you for 42 more days straight so I can keep hearing all the good work you're doing. As a powerful and force of a leader yourself and what sounds like an ultimate mentor, what is one piece of advice that you can leave our women of affordable housing with that at times can feel discouraged or overwhelmed with the heaviness of mission-driven work in affordable housing? Do you have one piece of advice about how you keep going and how you keep your drive and your positivity and your can-do going?
I would say for every woman that is in that position, there are 10 others that are also in that position. So I don't underestimate the power of networking and organizations like WAHN and others. I mentioned the Women in Housing Finance before. If you put yourself in that space, you will find that there's an opportunity to talk about whether it's frustrations or being overwhelmed, but there's also solutions. There's also connections. There's also the ability to find ways to continue to move forward. And through it all, you find long-lasting professional colleagues, sometimes more, right? As you alluded to when you described the organization earlier. But you find that support that you need to continue to drive and support affordable housing, which is, hugely important now more than ever. So I would say be present in spaces where you have colleagues and a mission, and you will find that support to continue to keep on going.
I love that advice. You just show up and you get your cup filled up and you take it back out and keep doing the good work. Well, Valerie, we cannot thank you enough for being part of housing for all these years and continuing to still do this and make such a difference. I cannot wait to meet you in person. Yes. And I thank you so much for spending your time with us. I know you're busy and I kept you the entire time that I was like, that's actually an hour. So thank you so much.
It was a pleasure to meet you and have the opportunity to speak with you.
Same here. Well, you all have a great day and thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here with us on WAHNcast, the official podcast of the Women's Affordable Housing Network. Every guest, every story, every listen helps us keep this space real, rooted, and resonant, and we're so glad you're a part of it. Big thanks to our guests for sharing their time and knowledge with us, to our sponsors for making this platform possible, and to you for tuning in, sharing, and helping us keep this conversation going. Be sure to follow, rate, and share WAHNcast wherever you listen, and bring a friend next time we save them a seat.